Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's good to see all of you. This is our last session together. I'm so grateful. Some of you have been along for the whole journey. So thank you for being here with us. And if you're here for the first time today, that's wonderful too. Today we are going to be talking about something that has taken much of the conversation around my book and the many talks and interviews and sessions that I've done in the last year and a half that I did not expect would be as robust a part of the conversation as it is. But I think is really speaks to the moment that we're in right now, which is what happens when the person who's coming around the circle from the other direction is not coming toward you with a broken heart, but is coming at you with ideas or views or actions that have caused you great pain or have caused people you love great pain. And so I want to talk and think a little bit together about how we navigate this time, about some of the tools that we have from the ancient rabbis that help us understand how to hold a complex reality in which we are called into relationship again and again with people who break our hearts. So that's the theme for today. Um, we did some really interesting work on this on the Shabbaton this past weekend. Were any of you there? I'm trying to see. Kathy was there. Hello. Maybe a couple of others as well, Elizabeth. But we're going to take it from a different angle right now. So let me start. I have I think Jess just shared with you the the Google version of the source sheet. You also have the Safaria link there. So you can use whichever one's easier for you, but I'm going to share it on the Google side because as we found, it's a little bit easier to navigate together. Let me skip down all the way to, I don't know what this is going to be, page, whatever the last page is. It might be page 6, page 5. Okay. Right. It's just actually at the end. I'm going to make it so that it starts on a new page so we can see it more clearly. Okay, so I'm bringing us back to the Mishnah that we started with in session 1, which is the core paradigm that we're using for all of these conversations. And I just want to remind us how this works. So, kol hanichnasin laharabayit, anyone who goes up into that Temple Mount space would enter nichnasin derech yamin, would enter and turn to the right, umakifin v'yotzin derech smol. They would circle around and then they would exit from the left. Chutz mimisha ero davar, except for someone to whom something terrible had happened. That person instead would go up and would turn to the left when everybody else is turning to the right. Now, you recall probably that the text is very terse here. It's interesting to go back and look at it in light of all of the really, I think, dynamic and robust conversations we've had in the last couple of months looking at it. But the text is very terse. Malach makif l'smol. Someone who's coming from the right turns to the person coming from the left and says, "What happened to you, person who walks to the left?" And the person answers, "Sha'ani avel. I'm a mourner." Now we have extrapolated for the sake of this entire conversation that we've been having from the avel or the mourner to the broad category of anyone with a broken heart. Okay. So now the people who are coming up for pilgrimage coming from the right encounter someone with a broken heart coming from the left. They say, "What happened to you?" They say, "I am brokenhearted. I lost my loved one. I'm sick. I'm lonely. I'm in pain." And they receive a blessing. Hashochem b'bayit hazeh Yenachamecha. May the one who dwells in this place also grant you comfort. That first part of our Mishnah has been the foundation for the whole conversation so far.
They're going to pick.
But actually, the Mishnah goes on and offers a second example of a person who would come up on those pilgrimage days and not turn to the right like everybody else, but instead turn to the left. And here's the second example. She'ani minudeh, because I am a minudeh, because I have been ostracized. the person says. So now we have to envision a second category of people. The menudeh was a very particular form of category for people who had been punished in the ancient world. The most extreme form of punishment was excommunication. Excommunication is a death sentence, essentially. You are never going to be able to engage anyone in the community again for any reason. And that's excruciating. I mean, imagine a person completely isolated from everybody they know and everyone in their society forever. The menudeh, someone who's in nidui, is one step short of excommunication. This is a person who, let's look at your faces for a moment. This is a person who has engaged in behaviors that have caused so much pain that they should almost be excommunicated. Okay? They've hurt individuals, or they've hurt the whole community, so much so that they need to have some kind of punishment meted out to them. The society cannot function with them in it because they're causing too much pain. But it doesn't exactly rise to the level of excommunication yet. So the menudeh was a person who's in a kind of temporary excommunication. They are separated from the community for a short period of time in the hopes that they will recognize that they've done something wrong, and hopefully they'll make tshuva. They will be transformed. They will change their approach so that they can be part of the community again. So it's kind of like a short-term prison sentence in a responsible, restorative justice-oriented criminal justice system. So it would be oriented toward both removal of the person from the community where they're causing the pain, in order to give them the opportunity to change so that they can come back and healing can be possible for them and for the community that they've harmed. Okay? Imagine if such a system existed in our time. It's really the opposite of what our current carceral system is designed to do, which is strictly punitive and not designed to be restorative in its purpose. This was designed to be restorative. But this person, during the period that they are separated from the population, the population is not to engage them in any way. You do not invite them into your sacred spaces. You do not engage with them socially. We don't learn Torah with them. We don't do business with them. They are, for all intents and purposes, excommunicated. It's just only for a short period of time. Again, the idea is a short-term punishment that will lead to a long-term kind of transformation. Okay. But that day, on that holy day, when hundreds of thousands of people show up in Jerusalem and show up on the Temple Mount, that person is there too. And when they come up and everybody's going through the same entryway and turning this way, they turn in the direction of the mourner, the brokenhearted, the one who lost their home in the fire, the one who just got a diagnosis. The ostracized, the one who's caused harm in the community, turns in the direction of the brokenhearted. And when they do, they are met with the same question that the brokenhearted person was met with, malach makif l'smol, and they answer sha'ani menudeh. They say out loud, I am going this way not because I'm a mourner, but because I have been ostracized, which means I did something that caused pain to the community. And look what happens in response to that menudeh, that ostracized person. Hashochein b'bayit hazeh yiten b'libam v'yikarvucha, says Rabbi Meir. May the Holy One who dwells in this place inspire your community to see you in the fullness of your humanity and draw you back in, to be understanding toward you, you who cause pain. May they see you, open their hearts toward you, and welcome you back. Rabbi Yossi, though, says, no, why are you saying that? That's making it seem like the fault here is on the side of the community for ostracizing, but really the fault's on the side of the ostracized for engaging in a behavior that was so harmful. So Rabbi Yossi offers a different take, which is Hashochein b'bayit hazeh yiten belibcha v'tishma ledivrei chaverecha v'yikarvucha. He says, no, the blessing should be, may the Holy One who dwells in this place inspire you to hear the words of your colleagues, to see how you've hurt them with your behavior so that you can change and healing might be possible. What's really astonishing for me about both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi's views is that they are both blessing the ostracized. Again, if this doesn't seem remarkable to you, you have to envision what it meant in the ancient world for people to be identified by a damaging sin that they committed that actually caused grave harm, so dangerous that we couldn't keep them in the society. We couldn't let them stay in the community. They had to go outside, but they come in on that day into on our holiest days in our holiest place. And when we see them, we probably know who they are. We know why they're walking to the left, but we don't avoid them. We look at them and ask them the same question that we ask the brokenhearted. And when they answer that the reason they're going that way is because they've hurt people, maybe even us, we don't curse at them. We don't yell at them. We bless them. I want to just offer that this is an absolutely transformative way of thinking about community and thinking about society. What does it mean to bring the person who's caused pain into our most sacred and most central spaces and see them in the depths of their humanity, even as they have caused us great pain? That's a challenge for us in our time. And I want to look at a couple of texts that will offer us some tools for how we might think about getting there. But I first just want to ask how this is landing for you, particularly in the moment that we're living in now, where I know that our communities, our country, our communities, our families are being torn apart, that we have ostracized people, people whose we know that their views, their Instagram posts, their sermons, their op-eds, their words at the dinner table are so painful that we just can't engage them. They're separate from us now. And what is the tradition asking us to do that might help inform how we navigate this period? What are your thoughts? Kate.
Hi, everyone. We have a friend who we cannot mention the word of our president or the world explodes. And we've known this man for 25 years. He is the partner and the caregiver of another dear friend who is seriously afflicted by MS and recently moved into assisted living. And he was coming out here from New York for a bar mitzvah. And in the past, he stayed with us. And, at this point, we were like, oh my gosh. And he called and he said, do you want me to come early to stay with you? And Matt and I had talked about it. And we said, yes, we will never mention politics for the 4 days you were here. But we knew as our friend, as a human being, and as a caretaker, he was struggling and in so much pain that he needed caretaking. And he came out here and Matt hiked with him and we, had dinner with him and we tried to help him heal because he is taking care of our dear, dear friend.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. I mean, both for the modeling of that generous act, but also because you recognized that there was a need in this person, a very human need, and you were able to show empathy toward him, even though I am guessing from the way that you're speaking that this is a person who's caused you some distress over time because of his views, and because of what you're required to do with your views when you're around him. Okay, that's really good. Thank you. Do we have one more example, or not an example, but just a reflection on what it means that in the most sacred place, on the most sacred days, our tradition is offering a model of receiving the person who has hurt us or hurt people we love and receiving them with the kind of grace that's demonstrated in this ritual?
Rabbi,
Yes.
Also, if we shut the door on people that don't have our views, then there's never any room for healing or, not moving past. But at least by doing this and by including someone in the community, and it makes me think of Brian Stevenson that says none of us is the worst thing we've ever done.
Yeah.
We just can't, I mean, it's hard to think past it and hard to be forgiving, but we have to have open hearts or nothing gets resolved.
So Diane, I'm hearing a couple of things from you. One is this idea from Brian, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. Really seeing someone else in the fullness of their humanity, and which is something that Kate's describing doing, instead of just seeing them for the pain that they've caused you, which is extremely difficult to do. But Diane, you're also mentioning what happens to us when we're able to do that, right? I'm imagining this kind of expansion of heart that happens to us versus a narrowing of heart
Yeah.
when we fail to do this, when we
Mhm.
only see a person as the worst thing they've done. We're not only narrowing them, we're narrowing ourselves,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We're becoming smaller too. Thank you
And
for
just
sharing.
one more little thought, and I always think of Nelson Mandela. Like, how can he do what he did and forgive? He's just, yeah, we just cannot be closed-hearted to everything. So,
Thank you.
mhm.
Thank you. Okay. I know this is a hard one, right? In theory, this is a very good idea, right? This is like, of course, we all want to be on the side of the open-hearted. But what does it mean to actually do that with people who have caused us harm? I'm going to go to Natalie and then we'll keep going. Hi,
Okay,
Natalie.
this is extremely timely for me on a very personal level. Without getting into a long story, somebody very close to me for decades, who was actually close to my father before me, harmed me in some financial way that is significant to my eventual retirement.
Mm.
And I actually spoke with with Rabbi Silver about this, who was extremely helpful. She is about to be sentenced. She has been in jail, is about to be sentenced this week. And at some point, I know that I will want to see her. And I know that I will want to not confront her, but to talk with her. And what you have presented today, Rabbi, as a restorative practice makes me imagine sitting down with somebody who I have known and who I do know, at least in a certain way.
Mhm.
But there's another compartmentalized person that I don't know, and trying to make peace with that. And also at the same time, make peace with myself and get rid of the shame and the embarrassment of having entrusted something important to her and feeling I should have known better. That's all I'm going to say.
Natalie, thank you for sharing that. And I can tell that this is very hard. And I know yours is very acute in this particular moment. And I know you're not alone in having a struggle like this. So thank you for sharing it. And I hope the rest of this conversation and learning will help even strengthen your position as you go through this and give you some options of what you might be able to do. I'm going to bring us back to the text. Okay. I want to share with you a story that comes from the Talmud. That's one of my favorite stories. We're going to go not all the way up to the top, but almost up to the top. Forgive me for moving us all around. But I'm looking at the text from Ta'anit, which should be the second text on your sheet if you're following along on your own and not looking at the screen share. Okay. So in Masachet Ta'anit, we are taught, this is a tractate of the Talmud, and there are many stories about when the community would fast because there is a drought in the community. And so the ancients believed that perhaps it was related in some way to their own behavior. And so they must have done something. So there's a kind of fasting that is designed to lead to a moral awakening, to a questioning of self that would ultimately lead to God's compassion in making it rain, because of course, a drought could be deadly. So there's the very famous story of Choni HaMe'agel, Choni the circle maker. Some of you might have heard of him. Choni who's named in Masachet Ta'anit. He was a kind of magical creature who when it wouldn't rain in case of real emergency, the rabbis would go to Choni and they would say to him, Choni, you need to help us make it rain. And I'm just going to stop the share for a second. And Choni would go out into the field and draw a giant circle in the ground and pray to God for the rain, and the rain would come. And one of the stories even shares that so much rain came that they were worried about flooding. So they had to go to Choni and tell him, please tell God to stop making it rain. So there, which Choni does. So there's this sense that Choni has this kind of witchy, magical connection, spiritual connection, and is able to he's able to elicit a response from God that even the great rabbis of the time are not able to. This story is about Choni's grandson, and you're going to see here that it seems like this is a family trait. So the grandson is called Abba Chilkiah, and I'm just going to share. I'll read the story with you now. I see a typo here. So this is the story. When the world needed rain because there was a drought, the sages, the great rabbis of the time, would come to visit Abba Chilkiah, and they would ask him to pray, and then the rain would come, which means it's kind of an inherited spiritual trait that Abba Chilkiah seems to have gotten from his grandfather Choni. One time the world needed rain. So it seems like this is, by the way, a practice, something that they do, that they've done before. But it happened one time that when the world needed rain, the sages sent a pair of rabbis to meet Abba Chilkiah and to ask him to pray for the rain. They went to his home, but he was not there. So here I'm going to ask you, as some of you have learned this text with me before, so you're familiar with sort of the arc of the story. But I want to ask you, when you see something that seems curious or strange in the narrative, to just put it into the chat, if you would. On the bottom bar, there's the chat. It's the fourth one over. Just put into the chat, that's strange. What's going on there? And let's see as we go through, if we were all in the room together, we would do some popcorn here. Okay, the rabbis went to Abba Chilkiah's home, but he wasn't home. So they went to the fields and they found him hoeing the ground. They greeted him, but he did not answer. Okay, pausing for a moment. Anything strange about what we have seen so far? They found him hoeing the ground. They greeted him, but he did not answer them. Let's see in my chat. Okay. Yeah, exactly, Ruth. He's farming in the midst of a drought. That's very strange. By the way, what that means is that he's working very hard. I mean, he's driving a hoe into hard, dry earth, which is a very different experience from the generally, I would say, difficult and strenuous physical labor of farming. It's made even worse when the earth is hard and parched. Why did the sages send the rabbis? Why? Oh, the sages are the rabbis. I mean, they're talking about this is kind of the leadership, the rabbinic leadership of the community. Now, why does he not answer them? Both Ellen and Mara ask this question. Why does Abba Chilkiah not answer them? And I want to keep that as a kind of open question for us. So he's not at home. He's out in the field. He's hoeing the parched, dry, hard ground, which means he's working very hard. But also, he knows there's nothing's coming from this ground because it's parched, dry land. And he doesn't answer when the rabbis greet him, which is, how would you characterize that? Rude, disrespectful, unaware, maybe? Something's going on with this guy. Okay. At the end of the day, which means they stayed all day trying to get Abba Chilkiah's attention. At the end of the day, as he gathered wood, he placed the wood and the hoe on one shoulder and his cloak on the other shoulder. What's strange about this? Anything strike you about that detail? Can you also see the chat in my We can all see. I don't know if you can see that too, or if you can just see. Okay. Um, so a really unbalanced way to walk, said Jessica. Yeah. It also doesn't really make sense. If you're carrying heavy equipment on your skin, it's going to tear your skin, right? I mean, you've probably at some point carried a heavy backpack or something, or like skis, even if you think about skis and your neck, your shoulder gets all red afterwards. Um, Here he has a cloak. He could use the cloak over his shoulder and then put the heavy equipment on top. It will still be heavy, but at least it won't tear his shoulder. But he doesn't do that. It just seems strange. The whole way home, he's walking barefoot, but he puts his shoes on in order to cross the river. That's also really weird, right? Why is he walking barefoot? Why is he walking barefoot on the earth? And why is he putting shoes on when the shoes are obviously going to get wet in the river? Then on this whole journey home, he comes to a thorny area. And so he lifts up his pants. Now, if you're walking through a thorny, brambly part of your hike, that's when you're really glad that you wore long pants and not shorts that day. That's not when you lift up your pants because your legs are going to get cut up. So it's a very strange behavior. When he reached the city, his wife came out in all of her jewelry to greet him. And when he got home, his wife went in first and he followed. Anyone think that that's strange? Let's see what we got. He seems to be punishing himself, said Lori. Seems to be punishing himself. Yeah, why didn't the sages offer to help him with his equipment? That's a great question, Jonah. Okay, it seems to be the opposite of what he should be doing. He should be with shoes on ground, walking barefoot outside afterwards. It seems like he's trying to punish himself. What's with the jewelry? And then I have to say, this is strange. His wife went in first and then he followed her. In ancient times, the man would walk first and the wife would follow. And here, in this case, the wife is walking first and the husband is following. It's just counter to what the customs were of the time. They're observing all of this. Then he sits down and he eats bread, but he does not invite the rabbis to have any food. Now, how long have they been out there with this guy? All day, Natalie, all day, Diane. They've been out there with him, watching him all day long. They're hungry. It's already a drought. This is like a major mission, and he lives far away from the field. So first they went to his house. They went from the city center or their home to his house. He's not there. From his house to the field, watched him all day, followed him home. That means they also went through the brambles and through the water, and they get to the house and he doesn't offer them anything to eat, which seems now not kind of rude and disrespectful, but it actually seems cruel, right? Could you imagine eating a meal in front of somebody who's hungry, especially the great rabbis are there, and he still hasn't even acknowledged them? Then he divides the bread between his two children. He gives one piece to the older and two to the younger. What's strange about that? Like so many times in our tradition, the younger child is being advantaged over the older child. It's counter to the custom of the time, even though there are many examples that counter the custom still is that the older one should get the advantage. Okay. So then he turns to his wife. Any questions so far? Are we okay? Okay. Right. Maybe he's in some kind of trance or he's unconscious or unaware. Okay. So he turns to his wife. He still has not acknowledged the rabbis, and he says, I know the rabbis have come here to our house because of the rain, because because we're in this crisis of a drought now. So let's go up to the roof and pray, and maybe the Holy One will show favor and the rain will come. So they go up to the roof. Abba Chilkiah stands in one corner. His wife, who doesn't even get a name, like so many women in the Talmud and in the Torah, stands in another corner. And immediately the clouds form in the corner that the wife is in. And it starts to rain. Now, they come downstairs having gotten the rain that they needed to ask for. And he finally addresses his visitors for the first time. And he says to them, Rabbis, why did you come? And they said, the other rabbis sent us here to ask you to pray for the rain. And he said, well, praise God, look outside. It's already raining. You didn't even need me, right? We don't know why his approach is this. Maybe he doesn't want to be bothered anymore by the rabbis. Maybe he's truly humble and doesn't want to take credit for something that God did. We don't know. And so they say to him, listen, we know the rain came not because of a coincidence, but because you and your wife just went up to the roof and prayed to God. But can we ask you to explain some things to us? Why didn't you return our greeting when we saw you out in the road? Now, I want to just offer that this line in the text becomes, for me, I think one of the most important lines of our tradition. They have received from this man exactly what they needed. They came for rain and they got rain. They also got a lot of other bad behavior: rude, callous, disrespectful, aloof, and actually kind of cruel, right? In terms of, I think the cruelest part is not sharing your food with the rabbi. So, or with anyone. So they got the rain. And what they should have done, and I want to just be clear here, what they should have done once they got the rain is left this house. This guy has done everything to deserve them leaving the house, going all the way back home, saying, mission accomplished. But that guy's a nut. And talking amongst all the leaders and elders and scholars and saying, you won't believe what happened with Abba Chilkiah today. But instead, they don't do that. They don't leave. They already have what they want. There's no reason for them to stay. But instead, they stay and they say, can we ask you to explain some things to us? There are a few things that were surprising to us. Ela lema lan mar hane mile dit mihalan. There were some things that were surprising for us. My tama, what's the reason? What is the reason that you didn't respond to our greeting when we first saw you out in the field? And here he answers and says what some of you predicted in your comments. Well, because I'm a day laborer. Someone hired me to work this field for the day, and I saw you there, but I thought I can't get distracted and go greet these rabbis because I'm getting paid to be a day laborer. In fact, he has incredible integrity. He's like, I'm not answering personal emails while I'm on the clock, right? I'll deal with these rabbis later. So he disrespected them, but it was for the sake of really respecting the person who hired him. Okay, we didn't see that coming. Well, some of you did, but I didn't. Okay, and what about this? Why'd you carry firewood on one shoulder and the cloak on the other? And he says, well, the reason why is because I borrowed the cloak. I didn't borrow it to put wood on it. I borrowed it to wear it. And when I give that back, if there are holes in it, if the cloak is damaged because of the heavy wood and the hoe, then I haven't honored the person who trusted me when he let me borrow his cloak. We're also, by the way, starting to get a little bit more information about him here, which is he's a day laborer, he's a hard worker, and he doesn't even have his own cloak. So he's poor, right? This is a poor man now. The one person who has the sacred magical powers and the ability to make it rain is also poor. I think that's very interesting. Okay, why'd you go barefoot the whole way home except for the water? He said, well, I can see the entire way, so I know I'm not going to step on anything that will hurt my foot. But in the water, I can't see. And there might be a piece of broken glass. There might be a hard shell. There might be some, kind of fish that wants to bite my foot. So I'm going to put my shoes on to protect myself. Might be weird, but at least it makes sense. Why'd you lift up your clothes in the thorny area? He said, because torn flesh will heal, but torn garments will not heal. Again, like he probably only has one pair of pants. So if he comes home and his pants are destroyed, that at least his legs will heal. Okay, so why'd your wife come out in all her jewelry then? Especially if you're so poor, right? So why is she all glitzed out and coming into town like that? And he said, well, it's because she wants to make sure that I remain loyal to her. I'm out working all day. She's going to come home and help usher me back home to make sure I don't get distracted by any of the other, beauties I see on the way home. Okay. Why did she enter the house before you and then us after that? And he said, because I don't know you very well, but you're two men and you're coming into my house. And if I went in first and then my wife after me, you might see her from behind and might be aroused by her. It might even render her unsafe. So I'm trying to protect my wife by having her go in front of me. Okay, but what about the worst one of all? Right? So why didn't you invite us to eat? We're hungry, just like you were. We're hungry. And he answers saying, because I know that I don't have enough bread in this house. And I did not want to put you in a position of offering you to come eat with us and knowing that I couldn't actually feed you because there's not enough and it's really not worthy of you. Okay, why'd you give different portions to your children? He explains, because the older one stays at home all day, but the younger one goes to the synagogue. And so the older one is around, can have a snack during the day. The older one has no food when he's involved in his studies. So he needs a double portion, lunch and dinner. It's not trying to disrespect the custom. Why did the clouds form in the corner your wife is in? He says, because she's the one who's at home giving bread to the poor. She's taking care of them. Whereas I give money to the poor, but that doesn't feed them right away. And she gives them food and they can eat right away. Okay. I'm going to pause the story there for a minute, even though it does go on. I think what's so striking for me about this story, which is not a story that people talk about, honestly. I mean, everybody knows Choni HaMe'agel, the grandfather. Nobody knows Avachilkia, and I think he's even more interesting than his grandfather, because here we have a model of a person who lives with such profound integrity, that he actually appears to the world as though he's disrespecting the local customs, as though he's disrespecting the leadership, but actually he's more righteous than any of them. And that is a fascinating corrective to the assumptions that we make about people when we judge them based on their behaviors. And what's even more startling to me than the fact that he's actually decent, even though we thought he wasn't, is that the rabbis stuck around to ask. I don't know why they did. I don't think I would have. I think I would have left. I'm just thinking about, and some of you mentioned a couple of your conflicts that you're in, and we talked about, as I said, conflicts over Shabbaton, some of these really difficult, pained relationships with people who've caused us, harm. And we know that they've hurt us, but do we have the kind of questioning in our heart that the rabbis do toward Abba Chilkiah, where we could turn to somebody and say, that thing that you posted was really painful for me. Can I ask you what was going on for you? Can I ask you why? What made you think that that was the right thing, the just thing, the compassionate thing to do that day? Because from my side, it hurt a lot. And I think the hardest time to do that is when you can, by all rights, just leave. If it hadn't rained yet when they asked, I could understand that they're asking him because they're trying to get in his good graces so that they'll get what they need from him. They'll get their donation. Do you know what I mean? But they already got what they wanted. So they're actually just trying to understand him as a person because they're curious about him. I see that there are a bunch of comments here. Robert, do you want to say this out loud or do you want me to just read this? Robert, your comment here. I appreciate this. I think the rabbis would be bugged by not asking, right? Going back to the second part of Diane's point before, sometimes it's not just about what happens to the other person, but it's about what happens to us, right? I mean, is there a part of us that will always feel like maybe I should have just asked?
Yeah, I'd want to know, like, what's up? Why did it would bug me for a long time? Like, why did they do that? Not why didn't I ask? Yeah, and so I think they felt like they had to ask. They had to know.
Yeah, I mean, there's something interesting here about the fact that this guy has a power that they don't have.
Yeah,
And it's a power that comes only from God. This is not like an advanced degree, it's not a Fulbright, it's not this it comes only from God. God has given one person in this generation the ability to cry out when they need rain and for the rain to come we'd like to presume that he got that special sacred power because he is spiritually elevated, that he has a kind of decency above and beyond the decency of the regular people. And yet everything we're seeing from him and his behavior says the opposite.
Right.
It says that he's kind of failed the basic tests of decency. So maybe Robert's right. And the people are really saying, like, I can't make sense of this. He's not just some guy who behaves badly. He's a guy who's blessed by God with a gift that I don't have, who's
Yeah.
behaving badly. I want to really understand what's going on with this guy.
I mean, who would think to like, I don't want to get this, this robe or whatever I borrowed dirty, and I don't, I'm gonna pull I don't want to get this scratched up, my clothes. I mean, he's thinking about like every detail, and it's amazing how conscientious he is.
It is. I always want my girls to feel like they can borrow any of my clothes that they want, but I'm like, just please don't drop that one on the floor in the
Yeah,
classroom afterwards. Like this is a
yeah,
really nice one. You can borrow it, but I need you to treat it with care. And the fact is, somebody pointed this out, that I think Surah, maybe he did exactly what the rabbis came for without even having to ask. They don't ask him until after it's done. Um, I'm sure that the person who lent him the cloak did not say, like I said to my kids, just be careful with it. And
right,
I'm also sure that the person who hired him didn't say, make sure you don't greet or wave to or smile at
right.
any visiting rabbis who come by. This is a person who has an internal sense of responsibility
Yeah.
that really is quite remarkable. Allie, I'm going to go to you.
I'm wondering,
Hi.
since we're talking, hi, about assumptions and things, that part of the lesson for us here is that you want to create like a compact, you want to create a sort of dynamic with someone else when instead of assuming that you may understand what their motivations are. So when we're talking about tshuva and things like that, it's both. It's a dialogue.
Right. I mean, this literally brings them into conversation with him. And the way I think that line that is really the turning point in our story, right? It's a long story. But that line where they say, may we ask you to explain some things to us, right? I mean, that's my translation of there's some things that you've done that have puzzled us. My Tama, what's the reason for? That's actually transformative in their relationship. And I'll come to Ronnie and Kathy in a second, but let me bring us back down to the Mishnah for a moment, just to point out what I think is quite extraordinary about our Mishnah, the original Mishnah, which is Malach Makif Lismol. What happened to you, you who walk to the left? It's not, hey, I see that you're crying. I hope you find comfort and consolation. Or, hey, I heard the story about what happened and how you've been ostracized from the community, and I just want to bless you that you should find your way back into the fold. It's not that. It's a question. Tell me what happened to you, which is the same idea as the questioning that comes, here in our story. My Tama, what is the reason why you did all of these things? And that in some ways, asking a person a question is an incredible act of generosity and also of love. You're essentially saying, like, I believe in your humanity enough to ask you because I would want to be asked. I'm going to tell you quickly a story that happened to me, and then I'll go to Kathy, and actually I'm going to go to Kathy and Ronnie and David first, and then I'll share my story.
Yeah, I was going to say that the what I think is really remarkable about the rabbis and asking that question is that I mean, it may be love, it may be a lot of things, but what really strikes me is it's really them saying that they don't know already, that it's not knowing, and because it's so easy to say to make up the reasons in your own head and to think you know the explanation,
Hmm.
but to even recognize that you need an explanation is a big thing. And so I've talked to Rabbi Artson about I feel like my theology is as I don't know, you know, instead of faith, you know, it's sort of, I don't know. And he said, well, you know, the blessing, Baruch atah, I don't know. So I always love that.
Classic
Yeah.
Rabbi Artson. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. I think that that's similar to Robert's point earlier. I mean, in a way, this is a cultivated character trait of the rabbis themselves, this curiosity, this desire to know. I could walk away, but I need to know what actually makes this guy worthy of God's blessings, or I need to know how someone could behave so badly, and not understand how hurtful it is to us and how hungry we are, right? It's in me. It's like, it's, so you could look at it, this is about him. I'm really humanizing this other person, or it's about me. Like, you might not give me a good answer. It could be that Abba Chilkia is rude, aloof, disrespectful, callous, cruel. But I still need to know, because I'm curious. Even if you're not going to be the person that Abba Chilkia is, I don't ever want to lose my curiosity, right? I don't think I shared this story. I mean, this is terrible, but I'm gonna tell you that I was in Jerusalem in February, and I was with a bunch of kids who are on a gap year program, teaching them some Torah. And one of them shared with me, in fact, I think we learned this actual story. And one of them shared with me that he had just gone to a soccer match in Jerusalem with one of the teams, which is notoriously aggressively combative toward Arab Israelis and Palestinians. They chant at their games, this one team, many of their fans chant, Mavet la'Aravim, death to Arabs. And this American kid, you're correct, Jane, this American kid who's on a gap year program was there at the soccer match. He didn't know about their reputation. And he saw this guy start chanting those terrible words. And he saw this wave of people join in the chant. So he walked over to the guy. Now he happens to be like a 6'5", American male kid. But he walked over to the guy who started it and he said, "Hey, I heard you say Mavet la'Aravim, which means death to Arabs. Why would you say that?" Could you imagine in a football stadium? So the guy said to him, Sheket, whatever, he's not going to engage him. And the student tapped him on the shoulder and he said, "Listen, I am only here for 1 year. I'm trying to understand as much as I possibly can. I'm genuinely curious about why you would say something like that, because to my ears, that sounds incredibly violent and problematic. But I'm guessing that to your ears, it means something different. Can you please talk to me about it?" And he said the guy talked to him for 20 minutes and they had a conversation about it. Basically, there was no good reason. He's not Abba Chilkia. He's not using that as a reverse psychology in order to build an anti-racist society. No, that's not what's happening. He's just a racist. But he talked about his childhood and how this has been the chant of this team forever, and that's why he did it. And it reminds him of his, what. So he didn't transform this guy, as far as we know, and he also didn't get a good answer for it, really. But he asked. And I think that even sometimes when we can't change the other, something came alive in him that he was like, I need to know. And I need him to know that I'm curious about it. And I have to tell you, if anything's ever going to change that guy in the football stadium who's screaming that chant, it might be because one day some American kid said to him, "Hey, why are you doing that? That doesn't feel like righteous to me. That feels violent and dangerous." So it could have be that it planted a seed. Maybe not, but it could be. So I'm going to go to Ronnie and David, and then Ruth, and then we'll close. That took guts, yeah.
It absolutely took guts, and I think in both those, your story and the original story, the rabbis could have gone back to the community and said, "Do you know how he treated us?
Yep.
He didn't say hello. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. He wouldn't give us food." But what they ended up doing was a learning on both their parts.
Yeah.
It was a learning for the rabbis to say, "Oh, now that makes so much more sense to us."
Right.
you are a righteous person. I'm so glad we asked you. So rather than go home and gossip about this person, they went home and shared with the community. Do you know what he did? And that is, for me, the most beautiful part of the story, that they didn't make assumptions, and they learned something for themselves as well.
I just wonder why they didn't thank him for the rain and then ask him the question.
That's a good question. I mean, and I suspect if they had thanked him for the rain, he would have said, no, 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 it wasn't me, it was God, right? Because now we understand his character, which is really interesting. And I'm just going to lift up one thing before I go to Ruth that I think, is it Rena wrote, when the conversation happens, the pain is lessened, right? They could have walked away righteously angry. They had every right to. But they didn't need to carry that around. And when they actually had the conversation, as you said, Ronnie, they both grew. They both grew. Now, I mean, this one happens to have a Hollywood ending, and I just want to keep saying, not all of them will end this way. And in the book, I share a bunch of stories. Most of them don't end with some magical transformation where we're like, oh, that's why you said or did this horrible, painful thing. But sometimes we realize that we were actually looking at it the wrong way. Ruth, give me 1 second. I'm just going to share this quick story. I had this challenge with a colleague of mine. I was really hurt because the colleague hosted an event for for the whole community, and lots of shuls were invited, and IKAR wasn't invited, and I just felt really kind of hurt on behalf of our community, and personally because we were friends, and it just felt not respectful of me. And I was carrying it around for a couple weeks, just thinking like, what do I do with this? Anyway, then the colleague reached out to me and said, you've really hurt me. Can we have a conversation? I'm like, I hurt you? Of course, let's talk. And so he shared with me that he had been honored and through some organization, and all the other rabbis contributed in his honor, and I did not respond to the email. Now, turns out I never got the email because it went into my junk folder. So I had no idea that he was honored. And he said he wrote to me like 5 times and I didn't respond. And I went, while we were on the phone, I found the emails in the junk folder. So I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I honestly never got it. And I'm so grateful to you that you brought your hurt to me, because then I could explain to you that I didn't disrespect you or try to make you feel small. It was actually something out of my hands. I said, but as long as we're having this conversation, I was kind of hurt when you didn't invite IKAR to be part of this community-wide thing. He said, what are you talking about? He said, I talked to someone on your staff and invited them, and they said no, that we had a conflict that night. Somebody who had the wrong calendar said no on behalf of IKAR. And so IKAR wasn't invited. So you see what happened here. I mean, if he hadn't had the courage to call me up, he would hate me, and I would probably, or at least he would be, distant from me and frustrated with me, and I would be the same about him. But now it's like, oh, thank God. I felt such a relief, as Ronnie said. It felt like, oh, I don't have to carry that anymore. Like, we're clean, we're good. Let's go get coffee. We have a lot of important work to do together in the world. I'm going to go, Ruth, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to close in our final couple minutes here.
Yeah, I mean, what I've been thinking actually fits in really well with what you were just describing in all the stories, which is that, I mean, we make up stories out of the details that are available to us. And I'm thinking about that classic Kurosawa movie Rashomon, where the story is told from basically one camera angle, and that's the story that makes sense. And then you change the camera angle and you see all different details. And that once you're able to see the other details, the story completely changes. And that seems to be every one of these stories that you're describing. Is you only know the story from one side with one set of details, and as soon as you shift the camera angle, and there's another whole story available to you.
That's so great, Ruth. And that's exactly right. And I guess the question I want to invite us to hold is, when we're the ones who are hurt, what does it take to shift the camera angle and try to see it from someone else's perspective? And I mean, and what are we afraid that we're going to lose if we do that? So somebody on the Shabbaton shared this very powerful story about a hurt that came to her through a member of her family. I'm sorry, let me say that again. a person on the Shabbaton shared the hurt that came to them because somebody in their family did not honor and respect their queer lifestyle. And even as they were processing the pain of being kind of betrayed by the family member, they were already saying, I think I understand where it comes from. I think that this family member is looking at it from this vantage point. I just wish that I could get her to look at it from this vantage point. In other words, what I saw in that person in the moment was even when they themselves were being harmed, they were already trying to find the humanity in the other. And what did they lose from that? Nothing. Nothing. They still know that their love, their life, their identity, their heart is exactly where it should be, but they also don't demonize another person in the meantime. I'm going to really quickly close us with one last text, and then I want to make a couple closing comments. And I'm sorry, we're very close to the end of our time. This is not to say that everything has a right to it. I mean, Deuteronomy is very clear. This day I set before you a blessing and a curse. Okay, you have to choose, says Forno. I present this day the choice between two extremes. You have the choice of both before you. All you have to do is make the choice. Our tradition is not saying, well, there are good people on both sides, right? Though sometimes there are good people on both sides. But we still have to be discerning between what's right and what's wrong. And I believe that we can be, just as this person who was sharing that they were in pain because of something that happened in their family still thought, I know I'm right, but I can still see your humanity. So sometimes I think people are afraid that when we honor someone else's narrative, that we're giving up our own. And we're not giving up our own narrative. We're just making space to also see something from a different perspective, as Ruth so beautifully put it. Okay. I'm giving Hannah Arendt the close to final word here. Not the final word, but close to final word, which is, you've heard me quote The Origins of Totalitarianism. And this was one of the reasons that I felt it was so essential to write this book when I wrote it. And it became even more so now in the last year and a half, and especially in the last few months. Terror can rule absolutely only over men who are isolated from one another. Therefore, one of the primary concerns of all tyrannical governments, forgive me for my typos, is to bring this isolation about. Isolation may be the beginning of terror. It is certainly its most fertile ground. It is always its result. This isolation is, as it were, pre-totalitarian. Its hallmark is impotence, insofar as power always comes from people acting together. Isolated people are powerless by definition. Why does that matter so profoundly right now? Because, as you all know, we are living through an epidemic of loneliness. Loneliness, social alienation, isolation. We talked about some of this in, I think it was session 2 or session 3. We are living in a time in which a third of Americans don't know the names of their next door neighbors, in which 25% of Americans say they don't have one single confidant in the world. Isolation is pre-totalitarian. Anything that breaks us apart from each other right now is serving the interests of people who would like to pursue that tyrannical future. That is a really critical point for us to hold, okay? So what's breaking us apart? What are the wedges that are actually dividing us in our families, in our communities, and in our society? And what would it take, instead of us taking the bait and turning against each other, instead to turn toward each other with curiosity and say, some of your behavior is puzzling to me. Can we please talk about it? Or malach, not to somebody who's coming toward us, but to somebody who's coming at us. Malach, tell me, because I'm going this way and you're going this way. So we see things from a different perspective. What do you see from your vantage point? What do you see from your perspective? And what happens to us when we do that? We grow, they might grow, right? They might be Abba Chilkia or my rabbi friend in my example, or they might be terrible people and they're not going to turn and change. But we are saying we are committed to living in a family, in a community, in a society in which we do not turn our backs on people because we are in pain. Instead, we recognize our pain and we use it to open up with curiosity to the humanity of another person. And I really feel that this could be the hardest and most important lesson for us in our time, to turn to one another with compassion, with curiosity, and with care, precisely at the moment that we most want to turn away from each other. And so I'm going to close by saying this. First of all, Jess has very graciously made a link for a little evaluation form. If you can fill it out, if you can take like literally 30 seconds and fill it out, it'd be super helpful for me as I'm thinking about different iterations of lunchtime learning and about how to use the book in interesting ways. But what I want to invite you to think about is how just the simple act of showing up on Tuesdays at noon or watching these sessions afterwards, because all the recordings are available to us afterwards, is an act of turning toward instead of turning away. Like all of you who've been able to keep your cameras on, just looking at each other. And I understand sometimes there are good reasons why we don't. So no judgment. But what does it mean to actually look at each other, to turn toward each other with open hearts and say, I'm here. And even if I'm hurt, I am going to try to respond with compassion, with curiosity, and with care. And that I think would be is the most powerful response to the challenges of our time. So I'm going to let you go with immense gratitude in my heart for all of you for joining us in this incredible journey of learning. Thank you. Thank you. All the classes are available online, so you can share them with people and recommend the Safaria source sheets and the booklets and everything. And let's hope we keep this conversation going.